A slideshow. Slide, speakers. A bullet point list. Scott Ledford appears on a video call at the top right-hand corner of the slideshow.
Thanks very much, Shauna. I'm hoping to win myself, so David's calling my name. I'm just kidding. I'm not able to win. But good afternoon and good morning to our friends that are a little further west, like I am. My name is Scott Ledford. I'm a senior director at ICF, and I'm just going to do a little bit of stage setting here while we welcome our presenters. So today, our presenters are going to take us on a journey through some topics that may initially seem small, but can actually be game-changing. These topics can create more and bigger opportunities for housing and home ownership, and they can turn something seemingly tiny into something meaningful. As we all know by now, our country is facing a shortfall in the supply of housing, which translates directly into the affordability of housing for your clients. But how can we, as housing counseling agencies and housing counselors, address the availability of affordable housing with a client sitting across the table from us? Well, one way is to become knowledgeable about and present options to clients that go beyond standard thinking, putting ourselves and our clients in spaces where housing opportunities beyond the typical can be discussed and evaluated. And really, that's what this session is ultimately about. For example, how can your client increase their effective income and mortgage capacity? How can your client get into a larger and more energy efficient home for less and also end up with smaller monthly bills to pay? How can your client benefit from downsizing or multi-generational living? So I encourage you, as you listen to each presenter, to think about how you can apply the innovations they describe to your conversations with your clients in your local context. So I'll now turn it over to our first speaker, Brian Fox, who is the Director of the Office of Single Family Program Development for HUD and HFA. Brian will provide a brief introduction of himself, as will Teresa and Janet when the virtual microphone is passed to each of them. Brian, please take it away.
Slide, Brian Fox, Director, Office of Single Family Program Development, Federal Housing Administration.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Scott. As Scott mentioned, my name is Brian Fox, and I am the Director of FHA's Office of Single Family Program Development. Our office covers all FHA policies, starting from origination all the way through endorsement. Or said another way, we handle everything FHA related from the time a borrower starts thinking about qualifying a home all the way up and through to when they close on that home. We have a lot on our plate, but at the forefront of our minds and the top of our agenda is tackling this unprecedented affordability crisis and the almost non-existent levels of affordable housing units that exist in the market today. I know this crisis is near and dear to everyone's hearts that are on this call. So it's my pleasure, and I'm very excited to get on here and talk about some of the policies that FHA has to offer that can really make a dent in this crisis.
Slide, Availability of Affordable Housing, a Journey Across the U.S. and Through Innovative Policies, Accessory Dwelling Units.
One of those is the accessory dwelling unit policy, which we're going to go into in great detail. But before I get into the policy, I want to talk about or just highlight a little bit of the data that went into, really, driving some of the policy changes that we made.
Slide, FHA's ADU Policy, Research. An infographic with statistics.
So I'm going to caveat that this is not our research. This is great research. We borrowed it. But these two studies focus on California, which really has kind of led the way in the early adoption of the ADU movement. And so on the left is a study that was performed by the San Francisco chapter of the Urban Land Institute. And two interesting things that we found in that study is that one, 46% of the ADU rental market was rented to renters with an arm's length relationship to the borrower. So what does that mean? Family, close relatives, friends. And what that leads is, or tells us, is that ADUs are a critical source of intergenerational wealth building for families. So strong, inclusive communities support families, and ADUs we find are a big part of that. On top of that, 58% of those rental units were below market rate. So this housing affordability crisis is not just for the homeownership side of things, but also the rental side of things. So ADUs are great for building homeownership opportunities, but also for providing affordable rental units as well. Then moving over to the right-hand side, this study was performed by HUD's Office of Policy Development and Research, and it found that 11% of all residential single-family building permits in 2022 were for ADUs. So, 1 out of every 10 units is an ADU. As I mentioned, that was in 2022. This number keeps growing. And one of the most promising findings is that ADUs could add almost 5 million new affordable housing units over the next decade. So, everybody here knows we need more supply of affordable housing, and ADUs is just, it's a critical component and a huge opportunity for that. So, taking all this together, we made a suite of changes to our ADU policy to try and, make a real impact here.
Slide, FHA's ADU policy, response to the research. A bullet point list.
So highlighting a few things, what we did is, first and foremost, we updated the definition of an ADU within our handbooks. So we really hadn't made, any major changes to this policy in quite some time. So updating the definition to conform with industry standards, making sure everything is applicable and up to date, so that the program has, the best chance for success as possible. Then, and I think honestly, most critically, we provided guidance for the consideration of rental income and underwriting of our forward mortgages. That's a key component. We're going to get into that in a lot of detail in subsequent slides, but just highlighting that as a big change that we made. We also established protocols for the analysis of reporting ADU market rent on appraisers. So just kind of setting the guidelines for how appraisers can, assess and quantify the market rent that is expected to be received from these ADUs, so that it can be included in their qualifying income. And then finally, we provided guidance for performing the financial assessment component of our HECM home equity conversion mortgages, which are also known as reverse mortgages. So, now seniors who, have an ADU that's being rented out can use that rental income to pass their required financial assessment to get a reverse mortgage.
Slide, FHA's ADU policy, background. A bullet point list.
So as I mentioned, one of the critical components was the inclusion of rental income in qualifying for the ADU policy. So HUD previously allowed for the purchase, rehabilitation, or refinance of properties that included an ADU, but it did not allow for the inclusion of that rental income to count towards a borrower's qualifying income. So, with that major change, FHA believes that, we're confident that ADUs can serve to enhance the generational wealth building potential for home ownership. We're very excited that rental income from ADUs can now contribute to borrower mortgage payments and help sustain long-term home ownership. We're all about long-term, affordable, sustainable home ownership. And, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're passionate, and, we're dedicated to increasing the stock of affordable housing. It's critical today.
Slide, FHA's ADU policy, changes to rental income policies. A numbered list.
So getting into some of the details of the inclusion of rental income from an ADU, 75% of the actual or estimated ADU rental income can be used to qualify for an FHA insured mortgage. So even if you don't have a renter, if you're planning on getting a renter, we're going to allow you to claim 75% of that expected income to qualify for your mortgage when you're doing a purchase or a refinance. Second, our 203K program, which is another exciting program that we have in our tool belt, and I'm going to get into that in more detail in a later slide, but we allow 50% of the estimated rental income from a new ADU that a borrower may plan to build and attach to their existing property. So even if you don't have an ADU today, if you want to build an ADU and you want to get renters, we're going to allow you to claim 50% of that expected rental income today to help qualify for that mortgage that's going to get you an ADU and get you that rental income. Even when there's limited or no history of rental income being received, say you have no history of renting properties, you don't have an ADU, you don't have any rental income, we're going to allow you to use that rental income up to 30% of your total gross monthly income. So, I can tell you firsthand that 30% additional income is very impactful when it comes to qualifying for FHA insured financing and building out that ADU. And then the final thing I want to touch on is the reserve requirements. As I mentioned, we're very big on long-term sustainable homeownership. We do require 2 months principal, interest, taxes, and insurance to be reserved at the time of closing. And all that is we really just want to make sure borrowers are set up for success. Life happens, expenses occur, often unforeseen. So when that water heater breaks, we want to make sure, these homeowners have the funds available to cover these unforeseen expenses, because it doesn't do any good, setting people up for a situation where, bumps along the road are going to cost them dearly when it comes to homeownership. So, one thing I want to mention before we move on to the next slide is the commissioner spoke yesterday and gave some very exciting remarks. And one of the things that she mentioned was that the provisions of our ADU policy, many of them go above and beyond what the GSEs allow for, GSEs being Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And so, we just want to underscore that and show that, it's really resonant of our commitment to be on the leading edge, continue to kind of drive the policy momentum forward and do things that help people where other agencies, might not feel comfortable. So hopefully you all got to listen into that. I know that was a great session, and I just wanted to give a shout out to the commissioner.
Slide, FHA's ADU policy, 203K, rehabilitation program. A bullet point list.
And then, as I mentioned, the 203K program is another big tool in our tool belt for increasing borrowers' potential access to affordable housing. So we all know, not only is there a supply of housing or a lack of supply of housing, but the existing supply is aging. And so the 203K program allows homeowners to buy and renovate or to refinance and renovate their existing property. And so the 203K program in combination with the ADU program is really a nice combination of tools. The improvements that are eligible to be financed with the 203K loan, including an ADU, are as follows. So you're able to convert a one-family structure to a one-family structure with an ADU. You're able to add an ADU that will be attached to an existing structure, and you're able to renovate an existing ADU that is attached or unattached to the existing structure. And so the only thing that these two programs combined cannot accomplish is using the 203K program to build a new detached ADU. Unfortunately, that is a legal thing that requires congressional support. So please allow me to appeal to you all, help amplify our voice, help this, initiative get pushed forward. Anything you can do to help us, add this kind of final component to our 203K program would be very helpful.
Slide, FHA Resource Center. A table with 4 columns and 3 rows. Column titles, option, point of contact, hours available, and comments. Text, www.hud.gov/answers. Answers at hud.gov. 1-800-225-5342.
And then the last thing I just want to highlight is that FHA has a ton of resources available. Our resource center is open 24/7. You can call, you can email, you can chat. There are a ton of educational resources. So I encourage you all to, please utilize these resources. Please lean on us. Let us help you. And then in addition to these resources, I will also be available for questions at the end of the session. So thank you so much. Again, it was my pleasure to come on here and talk to you all about the policies that we have available. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Teresa.
Slide, Teresa Payne.
Good afternoon, everybody, and good morning to those on the West Coast. My name is Teresa Payne. I am the administrator for HUD's Office of Manufactured Housing Programs. I have been the administrator since about 2018, and have been at HUD for quite a while, mostly in the regulatory kind of world at HUD. I want to thank the FHA commissioner first and foremost for her dedication and passion for manufactured housing. She has been a strong advocate for our program. And it's just a pleasure to work for her just because she has so much dedication.
Slide, Manufactured Housing 101. September 19, 2024.
So manufactured housing is one of the critical solutions, right, for housing affordability. So housing affordability, as everybody knows, is not only the cost of the home, it could be the lot, it could be transportation, food, and other things just in daily life. So we believe that manufactured housing is really one of the critical solutions to housing affordability and one of the solutions to the affordable housing shortage. So thank you for inviting me to speak to you all today.
Slide, OMHP's mission and objectives. A bullet point list.
So the Office of Manufactured Housing Programs mission and objectives really stems from our statutory authority, and that is to preserve and promote the quality, durability, safety, and affordability of manufactured homes. And we do really look at that affordability piece as being critical when we are updating the code and making any other changes. We also execute responsible regulation and solutions-oriented oversight of the industry. We establish practical and uniform federal construction standards. We encourage innovation and cost-effective construction techniques and facilitate the availability of affordable homes to help increase homeownership nationwide.
Slide, Nationwide scope of manufactured housing. A bullet point list.
So here's just a little bit of background about manufactured housing. We are the largest source of unsubsidized affordable single-family housing in the United States. We are about 9% or close to 10% of all single-family homes in the U.S. 96% of our homeowners have annual household incomes of $50,000 or less. So that's really driving the affordability component. 1 in 5 homes in rural America are manufactured homes. We do administer from my office the only national preemptive building code.
She holds up a label.
And that means when this certification label is placed on the home at the end of production, it can then be transported on interstate highways and placed anywhere in the U.S., obviously subject to zoning and land use acceptance. The statute was passed in 1974, and our first regulations were enacted June 15th, 1976.
Slide, Manufactured housing production. Pictures of a factory and the inside of finished homes, and a list of statistics.
Our production, this is some pictures of the interiors of our homes, which are not like they used to look, and a picture of an actual plant. So since the inception of our program, the industry has produced over 8 million HUD code homes built to our preemptive standards. And last year in fiscal year 23, we produced 138,764 floors. That a floor is 1 unit, and that equated to 89,717 homes, and production has been on the rise.
Slide, Priorities and recent successes. Pictures of homes.
Here are some recent updates just to give you all a kind of a flavor for what we've been doing lately and how we've been advancing our product. So in 2021, we finalized a set of updates that included 2-story designs, attached garages, attached carports, and attached manufactured homes. It also included some safety features such as carbon monoxide alarms if there were fuel burning appliances in the home. So my vision are for these types of homes, like 2-story attached townhomes, to go into areas that may not be what you would typically think of for manufactured homes, such as in urban areas, that these homes are produced very quickly, and they're affordable, and they're energy efficient, and they could come in and really transform an urban area almost overnight. It would just be amazing to see this happen across the country.
Slide, Priorities and Recent Successes, continued. Pictures of homes, an illustration of a water heater, and a diagram of a multi-dwelling unit.
And we just actually published on the 16th of September, our latest rule on the 4th and 5th set of standards. So we did get that published, and that included a lot more updates. It's a very large rule. It incorporated a lot of incorporation by reference standards. And also some of the key features I'll mention are tankless water heaters, multi-dwelling unit manufactured homes. The final rule actually went up to 4 units. So it's 1 to 4 units, and it's a single family home. That we think will really go to help increase the affordable housing stock. We updated materials such as wood, steel, piping, etc., to really get our homes on level, on par with site-built homes. We included accessibility improvements for roll-in showers compliant with the ADA. And when FEMA purchases our homes, this will allow them to not have to get an alternative construction letter. This will be in our code. It's in our standards now, because all of their homes are ADA compliant for roll-in showers. We also updated exterior door requirements so that we can have these great rooms, these floor plans that consumers really want and desire today. And that really updates our home as well.
Slide, Pictures of homes in various styles, and a logo consisting of a circle containing the text 50 years, Office of Manufactured Housing Programs, established August 22, 1974. Text, www.hud.gov/OMHP.
And here's a picture. That's our 50th anniversary logo. We're very proud to be celebrating 50 years since the statute was enacted August 22nd, 1974. And you can see the progress through the years, right? The homes really started, you could really mark our homes back to the start of the covered wagon, honestly. Those were true mobile homes. But they've really advanced through the years, and the innovations are amazing. The interiors are, they have great components, appliances, you can get stainless steel appliances, great countertops. They're really amazing. Even they have barn doors now in master bathrooms. The features are really remarkable, and I would encourage everyone to go to a retailer and see what manufactured homes look like today.
Slide, Janet Thome.
Okay, so now I can turn it over to Janet with the Tiny Home Alliance USA.
Hello, my name is Janet Thome, and I'm the president of Tiny House Alliance USA. We are a 501c3 nonprofit charity with a primary mission to establish new standards for tiny houses, especially tiny houses on wheels.
Slide, Tiny Homes. A bullet point list.
At this time, a tiny home is a marketing term, and there is not a universally accepted definition of what a tiny home is. The typical size is 400 square feet or less and built on a movable trailer or a permanent foundation built to various standards and codes. A tiny home could be a manufactured home, but it must be built to the HUD code and follow all the design and production requirements of a HUD-approved third-party agency. A tiny home could be also a modular home, but it must be built off-site to meet building codes and the specifications of the site where the home is placed. A tiny home is also built on-site, and once again, it must meet the building codes and regulations to where it is built upon. The term factory built is actually another term that means the same thing as modular housing. And the states of Colorado and Washington have developed a factory built program where tiny houses on wheels can be used and lived in as a permanent occupancy, hooked up to utilities and on a foundation built to the state building codes. Most typically, tiny homes are built as a recreational vehicle, but an RV is considered temporary occupancy and is not considered a dwelling for permanent occupancy. It's been both our blessing and our curse because tiny houses are built in this manner to obtain a VIN number and a title, but it's also created a barrier to zoning and to obtain financing.
Slide, pictures of homes, on foundations and on wheels.
The next 4 photos, these are all tiny homes. On the top left, that is a modular house. On the top right is a manufactured home. And on the bottom left is a beautiful tiny home on wheels. And the manufacturer exceeds the minimum requirements that an RV requires, but it's still not considered housing. On the very bottom right is a beautiful guest house built in a backyard as a site-built ADU.
Slide, tiny homes. ADU benefits. A bullet point list.
There's so many great benefits for ADUs, and tiny homes are the perfect size. When you put an ADU in your backyard, you can get additional income as a long-term rental. It increases property values and builds generational wealth. You can downsize on your own property and rent out your primary dwelling. It encourages multi-generational housing. It's an alternative to an expensive assisted living facility for a family member to age in place. It gives privacy and emotional support for families to be together. It also provides an additional structure for a caregiver, an office, studio, dorm alternative, and more. The cost is only in the additional structure without investing in more land. Adding an ADU contributes to the housing shortage for a sustainable future.
Slide, tiny homes. A bullet point list.
Tiny House Alliance USA is working with industry stakeholders and ASTM International, one of the largest standard developers in the world, that have granted tiny houses their own subcommittee. And we are developing standards that include a tiny houses on wheels for permanent occupancy, certification of tiny houses, construction methods to build to the universal design and to age in place, tiny house communities to share the cost of infrastructure, and microgrid utilities to connect a cluster of tiny houses in a community setting. The result of the new ASTM tiny house standards will bring legitimacy and uniformity to the tiny house industry.
Slide, Tiny House Alliance USA. Pictures of homes and neighborhoods.
The Tiny House Alliance USA is uniting all the legitimate tiny house resources, including insurance, the best third parties in the nation, how to build a NHTSA compliant trailer. We are dedicated to the consumer protection, and we are advancing tiny houses as a viable housing solution. Someone asked a question about what is successful in the rural areas. What is successful in rural areas for housing is creating tiny home communities to share the cost of infrastructure, which is very important. On the picture on our left is Peacewind Tiny Home and Small Cottage Community in Cocoa, Florida. It's a beautiful community of 84 sites on 34 acres and all the lots are owned by owners. On the right is a beautiful neighborhood in Bayfield, Colorado of tiny house on wheels that have provided their own community in their own neighborhood. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I turn this over to Scott.
Slide, Q&A. The slideshow disappears, and all the speakers appear on a video call.
Thanks, Janet. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Teresa. Great comments in there. We have some really good questions coming in from folks in this event platform. So wanted to spend a few moments going through our questions and answers. So Brian, you were the first one to present here, so I might start off with a few that came in that I feel like are pretty relevant to you. Of course, Teresa, Janet, as you feel appropriate, you can certainly chime in as well. So Brian, one of the questions is, an ADU has been a great opportunity for affordable housing. Would any of the FHA expansion and finance include building one on the property, or only including in financing if it is pre-existing?
So if it is detached, it is okay that it is if it is detached, it can be, has to be pre-existing. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, due to legal requirements or legal restrictions, we don't have the ability to expand the program to include using our programs to construct a new detached ADU.
Okay. If the person who asked that question has any follow-up, feel free to put it into the Q&A portion of CVent as well. Brian, another one that came in for you is, do lenders have to abide by these policies of including projected rental income at these percentages, or do they have individual discretion in qualifying borrowers in this area?
Yeah, no, they do have to abide by our policies. There are a lot of areas where we do default to lender and underwriter discretion. Unfortunately, we do see some lenders be more conservative than we allow for, but we will encourage and continue to encourage and push lenders to lend to the maximum of what we allow for. So they can't go higher, and we hope that they won't go lower.
Just lots of questions on this for you, Brian. So we'll just keep going here. If the client purchased a home with FHA and now wants to use 203K to build an attached ADU, can they do it post-purchase, or does it have to be done at the same time the home is purchased?
This is a great question, and the answer is either. So it can be done post-purchase. It can be done at the initial closing, all in one transaction. Oftentimes, we find that borrowers might need to space out into multiple iterations just to kind of spread out some of the costs that are associated with these transactions. But to answer the question, it can either be done all in one or it can be done post-purchase.
Okay. And we'll roll with at least one more for you. Just to confirm, the ADU has to be a full 203K loan because structural work is being done. The limited 203K loan wouldn't apply in this case. Is that correct?
That is correct. So the limited program does not include structural repairs. It's more minor remodeling. The full 203K or the standard 203K program would be the one that's appropriate for anything related to building or renovating an ADU.
Great, thanks. I want to open it up to the rest of our panel as well. If you have any thoughts on those questions, they were very FHA specific, of course, but also wanted to cycle back to one of the questions, Jana, that you already covered about models in rural areas. See if Teresa or Brian, if you have anything you want to add to that question.
So this is Teresa. Any models in rural areas would work for manufactured homes, right? As long as there's land acceptance, you could have a single section, a double section, a triple section, and now with these new multi-dwelling 1 to 4 units, you could certainly utilize those as well. So really any of our models, I believe, would work just based on the availability of land, but I'm assuming in the rural areas, there would be more availability, right? So.
Brian, any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, those are both great answers. I would just say that, FHA is a national program. So all of our programs and policies, will cover rural areas as well. And, I'd love to learn more about any models that any of the participants on the call are seeing to be successful out there. So if you have some good ideas for us, please feel free to put that in the chat.
Great. So Teresa, a couple questions rolled in that I think are probably best for you. And again, our other panelists can chime in as it makes sense. One of them is a mobile home the same as manufactured?
That's a great question. We refer to the term mobile home as any home that was constructed before our standards were effective. So it would be any home pre-1976, June 15th of 1976 would be referred to as a mobile home. Manufactured home is anything built from June 15th, 1976 after, pursuant to the HUD code. So again, it would have this manufacturer certification label on the back of the home, and that this would determine that it would be a manufactured home.
Great. Another question that came in, and you may or may not know the exact answer to this one, but are you aware of any factories on the East Coast? And if so, where they are located?
Yes. So our program has 149 plants nationwide, and of course that incorporates the East Coast as well. So in fact, I don't know where this person is located who asked the question, but we did just do a tour of a Clayton facility in Andersonville, Tennessee, which is outside of Knoxville. That's the Appalachia plant, and that was wonderful to see. But they are located pretty much everywhere. So if anyone has any more like state specifics they want to drop in the chat, I may not know off the top of my head, but I can certainly get back to somebody if they're looking at a particular state or area.
Great. That's a lot to keep in your head, the 147. So great that you knew exactly where one of them was. Another question that came in that I, again, think is best for you, Teresa, is there any progress being made on getting more loan products for manufactured housing? And Brian, you might want to chime in on this one as well.
I can defer to Brian on this. The only thing I can add first is that I know Single Family did update the loan limits for Title I, which is the chattel loan program from FHA, but then I can defer to Brian on what he has in the pipeline.
Yeah, what we're working on, first and foremost, as Teresa mentioned, increasing the loan limits to make sure that, everything costs more these days. So, the fact that we hadn't updated the loan limits in decades, we had to get that up to speed immediately. And then the other thing that, we're working on is building, what I'll call the secondary market side of things. So we really want more investor demand in these manufactured home loan programs so that, we're able to, continue to ramp up business. And we're always looking for, ways to modernize the program. I keep, deferring back into the group, but, again, if there's any ideas you have for ways we can, expand the program, we'd love to hear it.
Great. Thank you both. Janet, we've had you on mute for a little while, so let's take you off of mute and throw a question your way as well. So you were talking about tiny homes and specifically tiny homes on wheels, and a question came in: if the tiny home is on wheels, are they presumably titled with the Motor Vehicle Administration?
Actually, it depends. If it's built to the part model standards or the recreational vehicle standard, it would be. But once again, it's not considered housing. Although we are seeing some what is called frame-on tiny homes that are allowed in Colorado and Washington State that do not have a VIN number and do not have a title. They have a serial number from the third party, so they're not registered at the DMV. They're for permanent location from building to site built to where they're placed.
Okay. Brian and Teresa, if you want to weigh in on that one, I do have one I think is probably better as a group discussion than necessarily throwing it at any of you. So would a tiny home or trailer qualify as an ADU on a property? So I think there's going to be a variety of answers here. Teresa, why don't we start with you in terms of manufactured housing, and really what would it take for a manufactured home to be considered a tiny home or an ADU on a property?
I think there are a lot of factors for that, right? So, a manufactured housing could be built smaller, right? And perhaps to an ADU, kind of square footage, if you will. There might need to be some other alterations, such as like manufactured homes require 2 egress doors. However, our consensus committee, our federal advisory committee, is reviewing those requirements kind of as we speak to see if there's a way to perhaps have 1 exterior door if the square footage is smaller. But certainly our homes could be built smaller with some modifications. And a lot of our manufacturers also build modular units. So really not much difference between the two, except before they start constructing the homes, they have to determine and specify if it's built to the HUD code as a manufactured home or if it's built to a modular state and local code. So there are some differences, but certainly we can have smaller units and they could be built with some slight modifications, if you will.
Okay. And then Brian, I feel like there's an element of this which is about qualifying a tiny home as an ADU in the context of counting the rental income and things like that.
Yeah, so our handbook definition of an ADU is a single habitable living unit with a separate means of ingress and egress that is subordinate in size and meets all the requirements for a living unit. And as I've mentioned before, it can be attached or detached. So, I think my answer to the question would be it absolutely could. It needs to be, built to HUD code, all that good stuff. But yeah, it absolutely could.
Okay. Janet, any thoughts on that one?
One trend that we're seeing in the marketplace is a lot of manufacturers are deciding they're going to build to all types of housing. In fact, one of the photos that I showed that was a manufactured home was a manufacturer called Vertical Works, and they're in Wisconsin and Texas, and they either build to modular or the RV standards, and now they're getting their first HUD home, tiny home approved in a factory. So I think we're seeing a trend because they want to be able to meet the zoning requirements of their clients. So I think that's a very good trend to build to all types.
All right. Well, you just brought up a topic that we haven't really covered in a lot of detail yet, but just gets fairly complex fairly quickly. But this question actually gets at it. Can an in-law suite be considered an ADU?
I guess I'll take that one. So I go back to my, previous answer, which is, the definition of an ADU. So as long as there's, separate means of ingress and egress, meaning its own door, it is subordinate in size and, meets all the requirements, then yeah, an in-law suite could definitely be qualified as an ADU. There are different versions of in-law suites and things like that. So, the answer is always, it depends, but yes, it's definitely possible.
I think what I'd emphasize there, Brian, is it could be considered an ADU for the purposes of the FHA program.
Yes, it could.
Yeah. So Teresa, do you want to chime in on this one at all? Brian's talking about a separate means of ingress and egress. You mentioned previously it needed at least 2 in a manufactured home. So if the in-law suite was going to be a manufactured home, then we'd be looking at maybe another layer of requirements.
Yes, it would have to, in our case, it would have to meet our HUD code standards. And we also have requirements the way it is produced in the plant. So each manufactured home is inspected at one stage of production from an in-plant inspection agency that we approve. And also the whole quality assurance program is reviewed by those IPIAs, as we call them, the implant inspection agencies. And our designs are also approved by design approval inspection agencies. So they're stamped, they're reviewed to make sure they comply with the HUD code. They're stamped by the DAPIA, as we call them, the design agencies, to ensure that they are built to the HUD code in effect on the day it's going to be manufactured. So we have some specific requirements in the way our homes are produced and the manufacturing process. But certainly it depends what type of, to kind of steal Brian's phrase, it kind of depends, but it is possible depending on what you're looking at for that in-law suite, if you will, or mother-in-law suite, or whatever that is. Yeah.
Janet, how do tiny homes fit into the in-law suite conversation? And how they could be considered ADUs?
Well, because a tiny house is not universally defined, there's a lot of time that we spend on getting to know what the client feels that a tiny house is. And I think the lack of standards for them has been a barrier for more acceptance across the country. So a tiny house could, as I showed earlier, a tiny house could be built to modular, as a modular house or as a manufactured home. Factory built house is the same thing as a modular. And I'm hoping with our stakeholders that we actually create a new classification of housing to finally define the clarity in our tiny house industry, where it's finally defined and we finally have a path for acceptance across the nation. Because we have an army of manufacturers that are very small, and we don't quite fit into the HUD code because of all the stringent requirements. But we have an army of manufacturers that want to contribute. And I think the lack is our standards.
Great. Thank you. Teresa, we did have another question come in for you, I think. New York, Maryland, Texas, Georgia were all mentioned. Are there any plants in those states? You know where they all are.
I wish I could just name them off the top of my head. Texas has a lot of plants, over 20. I don't want to give an exact number. Georgia has a few. What were the other states that were mentioned?
Maryland and New York.
Maryland, I don't believe, and New York, I don't think there are any plants. But I would have to double check that. I don't think so, but Texas, a lot, like Tennessee, as I said, Georgia, Alabama, Florida. Florida was one of the last plants before COVID shut everything down that I went to visit with the former FHA commissioner. So yeah, so if anyone knows an exact spot, I mean, I could try to help find the nearest for somebody.
And you may have mentioned this already, but you were just recently at an event in another location that's a pretty big manufactured home producer area.
Yes. I can announce it again. I'm sure the commissioner spoke about it. The commissioner was there, which was wonderful. She did a press release announcing our 4th and 5th final rule of updated standards, which the industry has been eager to see us finalize. So that was announced. It was also our 50th anniversary. We were in Elkhart, Indiana, for this event, which was wonderful. It was a wonderful location. It's a big producer of manufactured homes, RVs, probably tiny homes. And it's also the home of the RV Manufactured Housing Museum and Hall of Fame. In case anyone is ever there, I encourage you to go visit it. It was wonderful. It had a whole wing on RVs, starting from the covered wagon all the way up to today. If anyone's seen the movie Breaking Bad or the TV show Breaking Bad, they actually had one of those RVs there. They told us the one on the show was modified to take out one of the doors, or it wouldn't have gone along with the scene when they were trying to get out of the RV. They just would have said, there's the door, there's the second door, so just leave there, right? So they had closed that door up. And the manufactured housing side of the wing of the museum was wonderful as well. And it had a lot of homes from the 1970s that they had remodeled, like it, and true to the time of the 1970s. The carpeting, the paneling, the wood paneling in the hallways. It was fascinating to see. And then it also had brand new homes, right? So it had a cross-mod home, which is a Clayton product, which has different features, like more site-built features, like higher pitched roofs, if you will. They'd have attached garages or porches. It's lower set when it's installed in the ground. But the features inside were amazing. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, energy efficient windows. It just goes on and on. So that was amazing to see. So we had that celebration, and we went to the museum and saw that. And then also, along with this whole event, we did have a manufactured housing consensus committee meeting, which is our federal advisory committee meeting, which I talked about earlier. And it's the first step in the process for us to update our code or regulations. Everything is run through this committee. They provide us recommendations, and then we issue a proposed rule. It's a 21-person committee meeting. So there's 7 manufacturers, 7 public officials in like state or public officials, 7 consumers, and I serve as a designated federal official on that committee. And so I would encourage people who are interested in manufactured housing, if they want to apply, you can just go to our manufactured housing website at HUD and look up the MHCC, and there's a way to apply. So I encourage everybody, if they're interested, to apply to be a member. We usually do appointments every year. So we have kind of a rolling, like 5 or 6 people usually roll off every year. So that was a long answer to your question, so I apologize.
All good, all good, all good, all good. I can only imagine being on a 21-person committee too. So, we don't have any more questions coming in. So kind of unscripted, unprepared. Teresa, that was a great kind of good closing set of remarks. Brian, Janet, if you want to provide any closing remarks, and then I can take us through closing out the session. Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, yeah, I'll go ahead. You know, I just I think just to underscore, you know, we haven't seen a crisis like this. Interest rates as high as they are, home prices as high as they are. You know, usually with interest rates being so high, you would see home prices start to come down, but it's only going the other way. You know, FHA remains firmly committed to doing everything we can to tackling the lack of supply of affordable housing units, the housing on affordability crisis, you know, everything that we've talked about today. You know, it's part of our mission, and we can't do that without you all. So thank you for the time today. And, you know, we look forward to partnering with you, you know, as we continue to do our work. So thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Janet?
Yes, I just wanted to add a great place to find where the manufactured home facilities are located is to contact the IPIAs and the DAPIA agencies approved by HUD, like ICC, NTA, RADCO, PFS, TICO, TR Arnold, and they would be the best resource to where these manufacturers are.
Great. Thanks, Janet. All right. So I'll lead us into our closing slides here. If we can bring those up.
Slide, Housing Counseling Resources. A bullet point list.
One thing I'll throw in here in the mix, and we haven't gotten into a lot of detail around this, but these resources are actually going to be very useful for folks who are asking about ADUs and tiny homes and manufactured homes. Office of Housing Counseling has previously provided some webinars and trainings on this before, and I'd encourage you to check out some of these resources that are linked here: the nuts and bolts of manufactured housing, providing counseling on manufactured housing options, and then manufactured housing resources for housing counselors. Included within there are kind of like cheat sheets and summaries of like, what's the difference between an ADU and a tiny home? You know, we throw these terms around, and I think a lot of times we're using language that in some cases the language blends together, but in other cases we're actually using the word that isn't exactly the word we want to say. So I encourage you to check those out. There's some great resources in there that are going to help you to kind of parse out what words to use in what situations.
Slide, other national resources. A bullet point list.
So if we'll head down to other national resources, there's also resources on the HUD Exchange about increasing the supply of affordable housing. There's an entire toolkit that has been built all around this issue of increasing the supply of affordable housing. We've talked about some innovative solutions today. There are others that are going to show up on these toolkits and in these resources. There's also implementation guides about increasing the supply of affordable housing. So HUD has put a lot of work into trying to get information out there with creative ideas, innovative solutions, things that are practical and actually doable out in the marketplace. And last but not least, here is a link to the regulations that have been discussed about building safe and affordable manufactured homes, helping to lower housing costs.
Slide, upcoming sessions. A table.
As I'm sure you are aware, you have one final session with closing with the Office of Housing Counseling and Leadership. For myself, I hope you all have had a wonderful time in these few days together. I know that you're in for an exciting closing session with the OHC leadership, and really appreciate your time today. And we can yield back a few more minutes of your day. Maybe take a short break in between.
Slide, thanks for attending. A bullet point list with links. Text, housing.counseling@hud.gov.
Thank you for your attendance, and please do visit the conference webpage, continue to contribute through the platforms, and here are some email addresses that you can get in touch with Housing Counseling, and also subscribe to the Housing Counseling Today blog. And again, the HUD Exchange page for Housing Counseling has a wealth of resources. And then you can, from there, link to all different places on HUD Exchange, as well as HUD.gov and other places. So thank you all very much. Hope you have a wonderful closing session, and be well. And build housing.